So now we're going to very quickly jump over to Marrisse. So Marrisse gave a fantastic talk on aligning teams through product roadmaps. And again, if you haven't had the opportunity to watch that, I highly recommend it. It's a great kind of, again, quite a thorough run through of kind of the inputs as well as the outputs of a product roadmap. So welcome, Marrisse.
Very nice to meet you.
Same to you. So again, we don't have a lot of time in this Q&A, so I'm just going to jump straight in. So you kind of say that you had your kind of 4 steps of what you need to do, and it's starting with a North Star. It is one of the first things. How do you, as a product manager, manage the North Star when it's often kind of not something that it's up to the product manager? Often you get handed it by the founders or people who are already there. Have you ever had a situation where either you've been handed something that you don't really agree with, and it's been up to you then to try shift the North Star a little bit?
Good question. It really happens. Like in my talk, I also talked about team driven and like when a CEO, for example, is driving all of the decisions, right? So it really happens. Sometimes you get handed like the metrics that they think would measure the success of a product. When I was new to product management, and I didn't have my voice yet, right? So I just followed whatever I was handed. Then eventually, as I got into different companies as well, as I got more experience, I realized the importance of also trying to lay out your suggestions, and then also trying to discuss that with the rest of the team, right? Just so everyone is aligned on what really should be the measure of your product success. So I hope that answered the question.
Excellent. Like, yeah, so one of the challenges with that I've personally encountered is like, so if you want to do it, and you highlighted this in your talk, you said, okay, so if you want to be shifting and putting together a correct roadmap, you need to know user personas, you need to have done user interviews, you need to have kind of insights and foundations in place. But so many places I go to, it relies on that top down. It relies on that person who maybe they have in their head all of this knowledge, but how do you, if you're in that situation and you don't have those foundations, so you don't have really strong personas or kind of interviews and insights, what would be your kind of recommendations on how somebody should start trying to inch their way over?
Yeah, first thing is just to come up with workshops. Like what I do is I lay out different workshops that our team could take, so we could discuss all of the different personas. So you start with your personas, right? You try to build those personas first, and then you try to extend it. You get to discuss also the metrics, like how do you make sure that you're actually meeting the needs of those personas that your product is serving. So for me, it really helps when that is done through a workshop, especially if it's a design thinking workshop, because everything is visual and we're now all working remotely. So it's better if you have if you're in UPM, it's better if you gain familiarity with design thinking. Then once you go through that process of discussing it, not just with the top level, the CEOs and the founders, right? Once you discuss that with the rest of the team as well, it usually works quite well, as long as you also have the negotiation skills. Because as a PM, right, it's important that you could negotiate with your stakeholders as well. So, because stakeholders, as long as they understand where you're coming from, they usually agree to it. Like in my experience, I've been lucky to be part of companies where the CEOs, the founders, the top level leadership are open to suggestions. So I think I'm very lucky there.
Great. There's kind of 2 different avenues I want to approach that on. So you mentioned start with personas. I've talked to a lot of people who, and I guess this very much depends on your industry, they're saying personas aren't so important anymore. It's more, what are the jobs that people need to do? So the example that's been doing the rounds is Prince Charles is the same age as Ozzy Osbourne. So if you put them as kind of a 60-year-old man lives in a castle, You get Prince Charles and Ozzy Osbourne, who are very different characters. So what's your thoughts on the persona versus jobs to be done debate?
For me, personas are still relevant because that's when you create your personas, that's also how you come to understand like the pain points of your users, right? Also their goals. So even if it's jobs to be done, if that's the approach you'd like to take, I think that's fine. As long as you uncover first the pain points and also what the goals of your users are. Because if you don't know those two things, then it's going to be really hard to build the right product.
Great. So it's all just, yeah, what are the problems that you're solving for your customers?
Right,
um,
right, right.
the second one that you mentioned there was kind of that often if you explain to stakeholders where you're coming from and what your rationale is, that they'll buy in. Now, I've definitely had some experiences where people have been more open, and I've also been on the receiving end of just do it. Um, just do it because I'm telling you to do it. So what do you do in those instances where you've gone through the process, you've tried to explain where you're coming from, but your stakeholder is still just telling you just do it?
I usually just do it. And then I try to, if it doesn't work, I try to explain. So this is, it didn't work because we weren't actually measuring the right thing. So because they usually realize it, right, when you show them the hard facts, like, so this is the usage that we got from what we released. It wasn't as good as we thought because we weren't thinking about the right metrics to track. So I think that's you're really gonna be in a tight spot, right? If they ask you to just do with what they want you to do.
Great. So it kind of comes back to having the instrumentation, I guess, in place to
Right,
be able to
right.
track. Um,
That's
so is that where you, because that actually I know you talked a lot about metrics and tracking them, but what's your view on where should you prioritize, I guess, putting in the instrumentation to track the particular metrics?
sorry again. I didn't hear that.
So it's just about, so the importance, and I agree with you what you're saying, that track the metrics, see the outcomes. But often in a lot of
Mm.
places they can't. They actually don't have their system set up to track the right metrics. So
Mm.
has that ever happened to you? And how did you approach kind of, okay, well, now we need to start making changes to track it versus making the changes to do the work?
Yes, it's actually very common because there are a lot of tools there, right, that actually sell being able to help you track the right metrics. For example, Amplitude and Mixpanel. But for some companies, especially startups that don't have the budget to subscribe to those integrations, usually what we use is just the basics like Google Analytics and Firebase, and that's fine if you start with that, as long as you know the right metrics and you put it in a place where it's visible to everyone. And then eventually, like in our company, we also want to invest in analytics, but right now we're still using Google Analytics and just Firebase. So my plan is once we have like a more visible dashboard, a more usable dashboard that everyone, it could be self-service, everyone could use it. That's when I can pitch to the stakeholders that you know what, we could actually take this to the next level if we integrate with another platform, say Amplitude or Mixpanel, for example, because those platforms also get into the what they call this, the granularity of each of the possible user segments, right? So it's also something that you could kind of sell to the top leadership.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much for the time. We're actually out of time now on our quick Q&A, but thank you. And I do have more questions as well that hopefully we'll cover off some of them in our panel coming up. So thank you, Marrisse.
Thank you, Yuri.